On a bright Manhattan afternoon when money flowed as casually as the champagne in crystal flutes, the private dining room of a luxury hotel buzzed with the smug confidence of inherited wealth, and 16-year-old Trevor Whitmore, dressed in a blazer that cost more than some people's monthly rent, lounged back in his chair scrolling on his phone while his mother laughed loudly at every joke he made, her laughter sharp and careless like she had never once been told no. And across the table sat a woman Trevor hadn't even bothered to look at properly, a calm, composed black woman in her early 40s with a posture so steady it quietly commanded the room, though no one had introduced her yet, and when the waiter placed an artfully prepared plate in front of Trevor, he frowned, scoffed, and without thinking flicked a piece of food across the table, the sauce splattering onto the woman's sleeve, and the room froze for half a second before his mother burst out laughing, waving her manicured hand dismissively and saying something about kids being kids, while Trevor smirked, emboldened by her approval, and muttered that the restaurant should know better than to sit strangers so close. Never apologizing, never even acknowledging the insult dripping from his tone, and the woman simply looked down at her sleeve, dabbed it gently with a napkin, and looked back up with eyes that held neither anger nor fear but something far more dangerous, patience, the kind that comes from having survived rooms far colder than this one, and the irony was thick enough to choke on because what Trevor and his mother didn't know was that the woman they had just humiliated was Maya Reynolds, the CEO of EtherCore Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity firm whose software quietly protected the financial infrastructure that propped up families exactly like the Whitmores. And as the seconds stretched, Trevor's father, Richard Whitmore, finally looked up from a calm irritation, creasing his brow as he asked what had happened, and his wife waved it off again, laughing, while Trevor shrugged like it was nothing, and Maya stood slowly, excused herself with a polite nod, and left the room without a word, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence that Richard couldn't quite explain, because something about her calm departure unsettled him, and later that evening, as the Whitmores returned to their penthouse overlooking Central Park, the incident became a joke retold over dessert, Trevor exaggerating his throw, his mother cackling, and Richard half listening while scrolling through emails until one subject line made his stomach drop. Urgent, EtherCore contract review. And as he opened it, his face drained of color because EtherCore wasn't just another vendor. It was the backbone of Whitmore Capital's trading security, the invisible shield between their billions and catastrophic loss, and the email was brief, professional, and devastating, informing him that EtherCore would be re-evaluating its partnership effective immediately, and Richard felt a chill crawl up his spine as he remembered the woman at the restaurant, the sauce on her sleeve, the way she had looked at them as if she were memorizing every detail, and when he confronted his wife and son, the laughter died quickly, confusion turning into unease, and Trevor scoffed at first, insisting they couldn't be serious, that no one would risk that kind of money over a stupid joke. But Richard knew better because power didn't need to shout, and the next morning confirmed his fears when Whitmore Capital Systems began experiencing routine audits that slowed operations, spooked investors, and sent subtle tremors through the market, and by midday, Richard was on the phone begging for a meeting, any meeting with EtherCore's leadership, only to be told calmly that the earliest available slot was in 2 weeks, an eternity in finance, and as panic set in, the roles inside the Whitmore household shifted, arrogance giving way to fear, and Trevor, for the first time, saw his father uncertain, saw his mother pacing instead of laughing, and when the meeting finally came, they were ushered into a sleek glass boardroom where Maya Reynolds sat at the head of the table, composed and unreadable, and Richard swallowed his pride and apologized, stumbling over his words, blaming stress, youth, misunderstanding, while Trevor stared at the table and his mother's face flushed with something dangerously close to shame, and Maya listened without interruption, then calmly reminded them that respect was not situational, that it did not depend on wealth, age, or convenience, and that what had happened in that restaurant was not about a stain on fabric but about a belief that some people could be treated as less than, and her words landed harder than any raised voice could have, and then she revealed the final. Rich boy threw food at black CEO, his mom laughed, but then his parents begged her forgiveness. Could have, and then she revealed the final twist, that she herself had grown up watching her own mother clean offices late at night in buildings owned by families like the Whitmores, listening to executives laugh while never seeing her humanity, and that every decision she made as a leader was guided by a simple rule. Power should never excuse cruelty, and she stood, signaling the end of the meeting, informing them that Ethercore would not only be ending their partnership but reallocating its resources to firms whose leadership aligned with its values, and in that moment Richard did something he had never done in a boardroom. He stood up and begged, his voice breaking, his wife joining him, tears spilling as she apologized directly, not with excuses but with raw desperation, and Trevor finally looked up, his face pale, realizing that one careless act, one moment of learned entitlement, had unraveled everything he thought was guaranteed, and Maya watched them quietly before saying that forgiveness was not a transaction and consequences were not revenge. They were lessons, and she walked out, leaving the Whitmores to face a future suddenly uncertain. And in the months that followed, Whitmore Capital shrank. Trevor was pulled from his elite school and sent to volunteer as part of a character-building effort that felt hollow at first, but slowly, painfully, changed him, and his mother withdrew from the social circles that once echoed with laughter, while Richard rebuilt. Piece by piece, humbled, and years later, when Trevor would tell the story himself, he would admit that the most powerful person he ever met wasn't the wealthiest in the room but the woman who absorbed humiliation without flinching and responded not with rage, but with integrity, proving that dignity outlasts arrogance every single time.